Hi, my second video is going to be it's not really going to be a discussion as much as the previous one, but more of an overview of my notes that I took for this week's readings. So the first article was called Reconstructing the Pre-Columbian World by Christine Colados. And the first section was called Introduction to Mesoamerican Archaeology. First, the author talks about the Classic period. And during this period in Mesoamerica, there was a lot of geographic diversity. And this diversity caused crop and product diversity, which stimulated a lot of trade in the area. And also, there was so many different types of food being cultivated that it became finally a good source of amino acids because they didn't really, at this time, eat domesticated animals. So, for the first time, they were healthy people eating a balanced diet. So even though the different regions were geographically diverse, they were very culturally similar. They had similar building and pottery styles, the same valuable commodities, which was really important for trade, like jade, iron ore, mirrors, shells, tropical bird feathers. And because of all this trade through the valuable commodities, this resulted in the sharing of ideas and institutions between wealthy families. And from these wealthy families, the great cities in central Mexico, the valley of the Hoka and the Maya area, they really developed into huge metropolises that this area had never seen before. And in all of these cities, they were kind of similar. They had plazas at the heart of the city for public and ceremonial gatherings. At the centers, there were also noble palaces, temples on pyramids, ornate sculptures, and paintings to glorify the deities. Okay, so then the author moves into the post-classic period. So during this period, there was a big shift in power. So the central of the Maya civilization shifted during this time from the central lowlands to the northern lowlands, to the northern highlands, sorry. But it really still thrived, although it was not as huge and centralized as before, and this continued right up until the Spanish conquest. Okay, so the next section of her article is called Introduction to Central Andean Archaeology. So, the Inca Empire was pretty much, if you were to observe it, it was just a lot of mountains and rugged terrain, and it was huge. And when the Spanish arrived, they estimated that the Inca territory was approximately 3,000 miles long. And within this territory, they were really thriving. They had theocratic authority, negotiations through alliances, and systematic taxation, as well as a military to support it all, which was huge. And so we don't have that many records for them. The only records that we have are mainly from the Spanish, because the records were kept on knots in colored string called quipa. So we have some of these, but not written records that have been sustained. So during this time, they were still cultivating crops. That's kind of important. They they domesticated the potato, the peanut, the avocado, the guinea pig, the llama, the alpaca. So those were really big contributions at the time to agriculture and their general living. So there also began to be symbiotic relationships between fishing and farming people, and so this, because there are different regions, some regions farmed, some regions fished, this caused a lot of trade too. And okay, but back to the archaeology. I'm not really sure why that stuff is in here, but so in the pre-ceramic period, the coastal people, the fishers, they began to build impressive monuments. So then whenever they would trade, like the people inland would see them, I guess. Maybe that's why the other part was in there. But so yeah, I guess it caught on. And also investment in burials and tombs that became really popular too. A lot of these remains are still around, and it demonstrates the inequalities of the hierarchy of power at the time. So yeah, there's definitely a hierarchy. We can determine that very easily from the archaeology. Okay. In so during throughout the early history of this region, there were a few main cultures. The first one is the Chavin. They were known for human and animal motifs. Then came the Paracas, and they were known for their burials, which where people became naturally mummified in the arid air, and also their huge filled family tombs. And the Paracas also continued the Chavin's tradition of animal masks on their buried bodies. The next group of people was the Nazca, and they were known for their polychromatic ceramics, giant line drawings of animals, plants, geometric figures, and which they actually drew in the rocky surfaces. So that's really impressive. The fourth culture that came was the Moche. They were really known for their multifaceted artistry, which included ceramics, murals, metalwork, and also their political structure was huge. It was huge. So it was so important to the development of this region. Next came the Wari people. They were known for their mountain canals, as well as their military, religious, and economic expansions. And they were most like the Incas, because the Incas came next. And the Incas, they built their capital at Cuzco. They had huge military power, strategic diplomacy, economic alliances. Yeah, the Incas, they were huge. So those were pretty much all the people that accompanied, that came through history in order. And next section of this author's article is called Reconstructing the Pre-Columbian World. And so there are lots of artifacts from this time, and they include foundations of temples, palaces, administrative centers, murals, gold, ceramic, pretty much anything that could be preserved. But currently the metals are tarnished, the potteries and shards, and the cities are overgrown with weeds and such that you can hardly even see what used to be there. So because they're not in that good of condition, artists have to work to reconstruct them. So just to name some artists, I took some notes on them. If remember, go back and check your notes if you don't remember this when reviewing this video. But so some of the artists were Tatiana Proskourovkov, Ignacio Marquina, Louise Baker, T.W. Rutledge, Carlos and Alberto Gutierrez, Edward Kiss, Wilhelm Diesel. Yeah, so those are the main artists that are working to that are really have worked to reconstruct the pre-Columbian world. Yeah, and I guess that's what we're studying now. So the final section of this author's article is called Archaeology, Art, and Interpretation. So the objective of art is to communicate. The objective of art in archaeology is art that tries to communicate every possible reliable detail. So whenever you're looking at a piece of art, a piece of archaeology art that's historical, typically the artist spends an enormous amount of time adding details and subtleties that most people don't even notice, and they yeah, it's almost impossible to absorb all of the detail that goes into this just in one viewing. You have to look at it many times and study it just how the same that you would study an article or another means of communication. And typically, the amount of information in these depictions that have so much information in them that it's probably not even possible that all of the information came from one excavation. So it's a really impressive amount of information that goes into one artist depiction. Okay, so moving on to the next article. The next article is called Goddesses, Gimbutas, and the New Age Archaeology by Lynn Meskel. So, goddesses, it's a hot topic. Why did the topic of goddesses become popular? So, the author calls this goddesses becoming so popular. I'll quote her. Academic scholarship meets New Age genocentric mythologized interpretations of the past. So, pretty much that means that the past is being used to prove gender equality. And her point is that this does not really reflect history. So her overall point in this entire article is that we should just accept our sexist past. We don't have to use our modern views of how things should have been to draw out details of the past and make it slant towards one opinion. And so there's a huge amount of evidence towards this. We have massive collections of sexless figures in art, which they're caused by the anti-sexism movement, and okay, so Mescal. Okay, pretty much this entire article is saying that Mescal believes that Gimbutas who calls herself a feminist anthropologist, has biases in her work, and she moves on to say that her biases come from her childhood, and Gimbutas was born in Lithuania, and she lived there during a time of foreign occupation. So Mescal believes that she is more likely to understand she's more likely to understand the feeling of a culture losing its identity, and and Gimbutas relates this to people dying for the goddess. And other historians, after Gimbutas' article, have gone along with their theory, but they mainly base their opinions on minor subtleties that Mescal doesn't believe with, such as the peacefulness of a society, egalitarianism, non-fortified communities, and dispositions to vegetarianism, which are all minor details. And this is not really archaeology. So pretty much we're creating a past to fix the present. Yeah, and that's Mescal's whole point. And the next article by Conkey and Tringham, called Archaeology and the Goddess, Exploring the Contours of Female Archaeology. So this is pretty much exactly along the same lines of what Mescal writes, but however, in comparison to Mescal, these authors believe that rather than ignoring all feminist archaeology, we should examine our motives behind feminist archaeology before we accept it as truth, but not necessarily ignore it. Okay, that was long, but that is all my notes. These are all my notes, and um, if I have any questions when reviewing this, obviously I have my whole 6 pages of notes that I can refer to. So, thanks.